Hi Y11 and welcome to the first of our cook-along practicals today. Just a couple of pointers before we get started. It is an optional practical, so you don't have to take part in it, and it is important that you have asked for permission to be able to do this at home. If you are not cooking along, then you should have now got some questions that you can answer as part of today's practical. Okay, so as I've already said, our practical today is a quick pizza. So the reason that we're doing this is just to get us into doing practical work, and over the next couple of weeks we will do some more cook-alongs. So as I've asked before, if you've got any ideas about the kind of recipes that you would like to do as a cook-along, please drop me an email or comment in the comment boxes in our live lessons to give me some suggestions of the kind of things that you'd like to cook over the next couple of sessions. Alright, so like I said, we are doing a quick pizza, and the base of this pizza is a scone base. If, however, as part of today's cook-along you haven't got the ingredients to be able to make a scone base, you might have got some alternative ingredients that you could use. So I'll just go over what you might want to use as the base, etc. So it might be that you've got some wraps or a loaf of bread. If you haven't got ingredients to make the base, but you've got something that you can use for the base, then that's absolutely fine as well, because it's all about being able to adapt recipes. Okay, so you might have got some of those that you could use as part of your base. For the toppings, again, you might not have got tomato puree or passata, but you might have got some kind of sauce that you're able to use as part of today's session. So some examples of sauces that I've got include some of the things that I've mentioned already, but some of the ones I've got tomato puree, I've got a pasta sauce, I've got some pesto, I've got passata. It might be that you could use some tin tomatoes, tomato ketchup, you might use a barbecue sauce. So again, as long as you've got something that's a sauce, then you can use that again as part of this session. So I'll just pop those bits out of the way. And then cheese, if you're going to use cheese, and then whatever other toppings you want to put onto it. Again, you can put on whatever you've got. So it might be that you've got a couple of mushrooms that are spare, you could put those on. You might have got a pepper, an onion, some sweet corn. Whatever you have got available, you can pop onto the pizza as part of today's session. So it doesn't have to be exactly the same as what I'm making. It is whatever you have got available to be able to put into the practical. Right, we'll get started then. First thing is you need to make sure you have preheated your oven, and it needs to be on gas mark 6, which is 200. I've already done that. Next thing, you need something to be able to cook your pizza on or in. Again, loads of different things that you can use for that. You might have got a pizza tray which you could use, you might have got a baking tray, you might have got a tin that you cook a cake in. Anything like that that is suitable to go into the oven will be absolutely fine for today's session. What I've done is I've put a bit of greaseproof paper on my tray to stop my pizzas from sticking. Again, if you've not got any greaseproof paper, a little bit of oil or margarine on your tray to stop it sticking is again as good as anything. Okay, so just think about what you have actually got to be able to use as part of this session. If you are making the scone base and you've got some flour and margarine, then that's what we're going to do now. So on your recipe it says that you need 150 grams of self-raising flour. So I'm going to pop 150 grams into my bowl. If you haven't got a weighing scale, what you can do is you can measure out your flour with spoons. So if you've got a tablespoon, which is the really big one, that is an equivalent to about 15 grams. So you can measure in your flour that way. If you've got the slightly smaller spoon, which is a dessert spoon, then that's 10 grams. So again, you can measure in your flour that way. Obviously I've got a weighing scale, so I'm just going to put my 150 grams of flour in that way. Right, so that's my 150 grams of flour in. The next ingredient that goes in is 40 grams of margarine. Again, you can quite easily just use your spoon to measure that out. Okay, so approximately 4 dessert spoons would be the right amount of margarine for that. Okay, so I just need to add a little bit more in. Take that bit out. Once you've got your margarine in, we are then going to be using the rubbing in technique. If we were looking at making this recipe healthier and meeting the needs of different groups of people, we could quite easily use wholemeal flour for this, which would increase the amount of fibre in the recipe, and as we know, fibre is really important for a healthy digestive system. Because I've got margarine in here, margarine has got vitamin D added into it. And again, as we know, vitamin D is really important for the absorption of calcium. And calcium is required for strong bones and teeth. A lack of calcium in the diet can lead to osteoporosis, but also rickets, because that's sort of malformation of the bones. All I'm doing now then is I'm doing this rubbing in technique where I'm lifting, rubbing and squeezing the flour and the margarine together until I get that breadcrumb-like texture. A pizza would be a suitable recipe to do for your Unit 2. However, you wouldn't use a scone base necessarily. You'd be looking at upskilling it to a bread base. The reason that we're not doing a bread base as part of today's lesson is because we would need to knead it for 10 minutes and then we'd need to let it prove or rise for 20 minutes. And obviously we've not got that amount of time in a 50-minute lesson. So once I've rubbed in the margarine and flour and got that breadcrumb-like texture, I can just check to see if there are any lumps, shake the bowl, big lumps will come to the top, they're all okay. At this stage, you could add some flavourings in here, so you could add a little bit of grated cheese in, and what that would do is it'd add flavour, but it'd also increase the amount of calcium. You might just put some dried herbs into it or some spices to add a little bit of flavour in, so you can again adapt the flavours and adapt the recipe to suit your needs and what you've got. What we're going to do now is we're going to stick it together. Again, you've got some options here. On the recipe, it says 100 millilitres of milk. I've got semi-skimmed milk because I don't want to put too much saturated fat in there. So if I was using whole milk, that I'd have got more saturated fat in it. You might want to use an alternative milk, so you could use something like coconut milk or soya milk. Again, if you were adapting this recipe to make it suitable for vegetarians, vegans, people that are lactose intolerant, so there's lots of different changes that you could make to this. You could even stick it together with a little bit of natural yoghurt if you've not got anything else, or you can stick it together with a beaten egg. If you put egg into it, it does what is known as enrich the dough, because it contains high biological value protein, vitamin A and vitamin D. So if you were sticking it together with an egg, it would add in even more nutrients. I'm going to stick it together with milk, and again, if you've not got a measuring jug to be able to do that, if you just add it in a spoonful at a time, then you can gradually add it and just check when it actually sticks together, so you've not got to worry about an exact amount of milk being measured out for this one. What you might find is actually, if you do measure it out, you don't need all of the 100 millilitres that you've got into your measuring jug, so just be careful and don't let it get too sticky. Right, so you can see it's just coming together in clumps now. I'm just going to add a little bit more. This technique that we're using is exactly the same technique as we've used when we've made short crust pastry in the past. So it's just bringing that dough together gradually so that you get a handleable dough that you can then work with to make the base. Right, so once you've got it into bigger clumps, just have a feel to see if there is enough liquid in there for it to stick together. This one, there is just about enough liquid in there, so I'm just going to gently press it together. If you're having to really push the dough together, then it means that there's not enough liquid in there. But what you want is just your bowl to come away pretty cleanly, and then you can lift your dough out to be able to move on to the next stage. Again, if you were doing this for a Unit 2, it'd probably be children that you would be doing this recipe for. So you'd be looking at producing a suitable portion for a child. So you might want to divide it into sort of 2 or 3 pieces to make 2 or 3 products. Again, because we've only got 50 minutes of today's session, what you might want to do is divide it into sort of 2 or 3 portions again, just so that it cooks a little bit more quickly and you can get it done within the time. So just gently knead it, and then you don't need a rolling pin or anything like that. All you're going to do is you're just going to press it down with your palm of your hand and shape it, okay? You want to press it down quite thinly because this is self-raising flour. It will rise slightly like a scone does. So you just press it out so it's about 1/2 centimetre thick. It's only sort of a rough base. If you wanted to, you could actually stuff the crust a little bit by turning it over. So you might put a bit of extra cheese in there and turn your crust over. So you can do that if you want to. Right, so once I've shaped my base, I'm just going to transfer it onto the baking tray, and then I can put my toppings onto it. Okay, so I've just about done that. I'll get my baking tray and pop the bases onto that. So I've got 2 bases there. Pop them onto the grease proof, and then we'll move on to what we can put onto them. So, like I said, it could be tomato puree, it could be barbecue sauce. I've got some pasta sauce left over from another dish that I've made, so I'm going to actually use that so that I'm not wasting products. So this is just a tomato and mozzarella pasta sauce. The majority of the sauces that you'll probably use are quite high in sugar, so that might be natural sugar, it might be some added sugar. What you need to make sure that you do is not spread it all the way to the edge. If you spread it all the way to the edge, what you'll find is that it will burn slightly because of the high sugar content. Oops, swapped a bit on the greaseproof paper. Don't matter though, because it's not going to do anything. Because the majority of sauces contain tomato, the main nutrient that you're going to get from those is vitamin C. Tomato puree particularly is quite high in vitamin C. If you are using tin tomatoes or passata, then that will also count as one of your 5 a day. Again, you can then look at what other ingredients you want to pop onto it. I've got some cheese that I'm going to grate onto it. Again, it doesn't have to be any particular cheese. It might be some cheese that you've got left over from Christmas that nobody liked that you sprinkle on it. You might slice it, grate it. Whatever you've got can go onto this. So I'm just going to grate a bit of cheese and pop that on, and then I'll have a look at what other ingredients I can put in. Again, cheese is high in protein, so high biological value protein. That means it contains all of the essential nutrients or the essential amino acids that are required by the body. It contains calcium, so again for strong bones and teeth, and it also contains vitamin D, which if you remember is a fat-soluble vitamin that helps with the absorption of calcium. So again, you don't need loads of cheese. You can sprinkle some cheese over each of the pizza bases, and then look at what other toppings you want to pop onto it. Obviously, if you were doing this for your Unit 2 and you were aiming it at children, you might look at the way in which you were decorating it, something that would appeal to children, putting a smiley face on it or something like that. Some of the ingredients that I've got include chorizo, which is a spicy Spanish sausage. You probably wouldn't want to put too much of that onto it because it is quite high in saturated fat. Good examples of protein-based products that you could put onto there include things like chicken, ham, tuna, which are all high biological value protein, but we have already got cheese on there as well. If you were doing this for vegans or vegetarians, you might look at putting things like tofu or soya or corn on there so that you have got some protein on it. Other ingredients that you might put on, like I've mentioned already, include things like a little bit of chopped up onion or some mushrooms. Again, mushrooms are really high in vitamin D. And you could go for some red pepper, some sweet corn. So any of those kind of things would work really well as part of the pizza. You might even go for the controversial pineapple and pop that on there because obviously that'd contribute towards one of your 5 a day as well. I'm just going to chop up a little bit of red pepper and then sprinkle the sweet corn on as well, and then that's going to go in the oven to cook. It will only take about 10 minutes in the oven because I've done smaller ones. So hopefully they will be out of the oven, ready for you to eat before you have to go to your next session or log on to your next session. So all I'm doing is I'm just slicing and dicing the red pepper. Because it's a red pepper, it contains vitamin B. If you remember, vitamin B is a water-soluble vitamin, and there are lots of different B group vitamins, but the majority of them are all responsible for release of energy from the foods that we eat. Okay, so I'm just sprinkling a little bit on there, and it'll just count towards part of our 5 a day. Any fruit or vegetables that you do eat also contain fibre, so it's helping with that as well. So evenly distributed. Obviously, if you're doing this for your Unit 2, you'd be looking at making sure all of the portion sizes were exactly the same. Again, I'm just going to pop some sweet corn on there as well. But like I said, it's about popping on whatever you've got. It doesn't matter if everybody's is totally different. Right, so I've got my toppings on. So that's now going to go into the oven. So as you can see, I've got them loaded up with the ingredients that I've put on as toppings. That's now going to go into the oven. Please make sure you're using oven gloves, etc. and you're safe when you're using the oven. Like I said, they'll take about 10 minutes. You can do your washing up to make sure that you leave your kitchen nice and tidy after doing this while you're waiting for these to cook. What you're looking for is a nice golden brown outside and for the base underneath to be nice and solid. Once it gets to that stage, take them out of the oven, and it'd be fantastic if you could take some pictures of your outcomes today. Okay, I'll leave you to